Hello, all you beautiful people. Welcome back to the Relationships on Reddit podcast. Whether you're listening on YouTube, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and whatever you're doing, whether you're walking in nature, you're doing chores around the house, you're driving somewhere, I just want to say welcome. This podcast is, of course, sponsored by Man-Made Media, and in this podcast, I go through stories that I find on Reddit involving sexuality or relationships, and I explain the underlying psychology of what's going on in the situation. I've got 3 stories for you today. The first one is of a married woman who was caught cheating and now decides that she wants to be polyamorous. The second story is a woman who is worried that she's bored in bed because she can't have sex. She can't have vaginal sex with her partner because it causes pain in her vagina, and that's provoked an argument between the both of them. And the third story actually isn't from Reddit. It's an email that I got from one of my Patreon subscribers. So I'm going to go through that. He's worried that he's becoming a bit too bitter in order to have success with women. So we'll get into that. Let's start with our first story. It's called Opened Our Marriage and She is Doing Just Fine. I, on the other hand, am just failing. I, 35-year-old male, am having a hard time being in an open relationship. We opened our relationship because she, 36-year-old female, was cheating, and I thought this would help end the jealous rages and insecurities of being lied to. We have been communicating really well, and our marriage has improved on some levels, but I am struggling to find women that are interested in married guys. She, on the other hand, is having no issues finding willing participants. What a shocker. Not really surprised by this, but I figured it would be less lopsided. I don't know what to do. Also, I'm having issues mentally finding the right headspace to sleep with other people. I feel like I'm trapped and I don't know what to do. I want the ability to sleep with others if somehow I can make it work for me, but I'm having trouble with the lack of equity in this arrangement. Stressed, to say the least. Anyone have advice? Yes, I have lots of advice, because this situation is an utter disaster that you found yourself in. My empathy goes out to you. This is not a good situation. Okay, let's start with the obvious. The problem here is not that your relationship was monogamous. The problem is that she cheated on you and she lied about it. You know, the sex, obviously her sleeping with other guys is not great, but the fact that she went behind your back and did this, that's what needs to be addressed. And that has not been addressed by you opening your relationship. She didn't need to cheat on you. She could have started this off with a calm, reasonable discussion about polyamory. She could have said, look, I'm having these urges. This is something that I want to explore. How do you feel about that? How could we go about this? Instead, she lied and she went behind your back. And this isn't a small lie. This is a big lie. She cheated on you. She's a fundamentally dishonest person. And you're worried about your jealous rages and feeling insecure. Let me tell you, being jealous and insecure in this situation is a perfectly rational response. Those are the emotions that you should be feeling. If you're not feeling jealous, if you're not feeling insecure, that's a problem, because it means that your emotional mechanism, your response mechanism, is not working. And I know in our culture we have this feeling like anger is inherently bad, but it's not. If you're angry, if you're going into rages about being cheated on and lied to about it, that is an appropriate response. The other emotion that's getting a lot of bad press at the moment is jealousy. And there's people saying that it's completely unnatural to be jealous. We should live in a sort of free love, polyamorous paradise, utopia, and that jealousy is, just a social construct. But that's absolutely nonsense. It's not a social construct. Jealousy is biological in its nature. For a man, deep in your biology, and I know I've spoken about this many times in the past, and I'm confident I'll speak about this many times in the future, but it's worth repeating until it really sinks deep into your mind, that deep in your biology is a fear that as a man, you're going to be stuck raising somebody else's child. It is one of your primal fears as a man, because what you want to do biologically is pass on your genes to the next generation. If you're going to spend your time, energy, and resources raising a child, you want to make damn sure that it's yours. You don't want to raise another person's child. That's the source of your jealousy. If she's having sex with other men, then she's potentially turning you into a chump, turning you into somebody who's stuck, propagating somebody else's genes. That is objectively speaking, a failure as a biological organism if you spend your life doing that. So if she's trying to shame you for being jealous, if anybody ever tries to, shame you for having these feelings of being jealous or insecure when they're obviously cheating and they're just trying to get away with something, do not trust somebody like that. So here you are in this situation where you want to solve the problem that's been presented in your marriage. And the problem is that you're married to a liar and a cheater. Well, there's two options. There's one, you can take the path that you have taken and give her permission to cheat on you in the form of an open relationship. That way she's no longer a cheater, I guess, technically, and she doesn't need to lie about it. I mean, that's one solution. Or there is the much more, what I would say, straightforward and obvious solution, the one that's fair, is demand that she stop lying and stop cheating, otherwise you'll leave her. I don't really know why in getting caught cheating on you, the onus is suddenly on you to make a change. It should have been the other way, obviously. Let's talk for a moment about polyamory. So, just straight up, first of all, I'm skeptical as to whether or not it can work. In most cases, I am sure that it can work in some cases, and for some specific people, polyamory is the correct thing to do. But I would imagine those people are the exception and not the rule. And even if you're one of these rare people that polyamory is what suits you and your partner best, understand there is a very specific way to go about it. You can do polyamory well, or you can do it really badly. And most people are doing it really, really badly. So, a couple of basic rules if you want to go down the polyamory route. To start with, there needs to be complete honesty from the beginning. That's absolutely essential, non-negotiable. You can't start off with deceptions, manipulations, lies. Any crops sown with that kind of poisonous seed, they're going to be toxic to consume. The second is you want to make sure you're only moving as fast as the slowest person in the relationship. If both people are technically on board with experimenting with this, but one person's going, gosh, I'm feeling insecure, this is bringing up a lot for me, I'm feeling very vulnerable. The other person can't be like, oh, well, we've agreed to this, so I'm just going to go off and sleep with 20 people and you just have to deal with it. That's not the right way to go about it. You have to take care of your primary partnership first. And speaking of your primary partnership, you shouldn't be engaging in polyamory unless your relationship, the first relationship, the one that came first, is rock solid and functional. And this relationship, because it's starting with cheating and lies and your jealousy, is obviously not functional. So after she got caught cheating, you shouldn't have gone into polyamory. What you should have gone into is therapy. You should have had lots of discussions to try and bring your relationship back on track. Like, how did you get to this situation? This is such a disastrous way to try and resolve, this problem. And it makes you wonder, how did she manage this? I don't want to give her too many props because I so strongly disapprove of what she's done, but it is kind of impressive to get caught lying and cheating and then somehow convince him that the real problem here is not your terrible behavior and lack of ethics. The problem is the fact that you're monogamous and that's the simple solution. I have to imagine that she was enabled in this because society seems to be increasingly pro-polyamory. And there's a sort of a push to make polyamory the norm and to say that it's natural. And while there's some positivity there in that we're normalizing, sexual attraction to other people, I can kind of get behind that. The acting on it's a different state of affairs. But regardless, I think that the negative aspect to this pro-polyamorous push that we're seeing is a lot more increased shaming of men who have a problem with it. A man who says, no, I'm not comfortable with polyamory, I want you to stay completely loyal and faithful to me, he runs the risk in highly progressive aspects of society of being called possessive and insecure, like he's just some kind of patriarchal caveman. And, the jealousy that he's experiencing is not legitimate because it's just a social construct and he just needs to get over it. And I think that a lot of men, for them, the morals that are most important, the values that they espouse and want to live up to, like honor and doing the right thing and being a moral, good man, good person, if you live in that kind of society where you're being told that the right and honorable thing to do is to let women have their freedom and not be possessive and jealous, you're going to feel pressured into accepting this. It's like your own virtue is being used against you. And that is a terrible, terrible thing. I really hope that society stops pushing this because, it ends up in situations like this poor guy. I bet 30 years ago, before the polyamory really became like a mainstream talking point, there's no way that he would have been okay with this. I think that her behavior has been enabled by the state of modern society. Now, let me be clear. I am not saying that polyamory is inherently bad and it should never be available. I'm pro-freedom, like I said, it will suit some people. And so if you want to try polyamory and you really, really think that it's right for you, I mean, I'm skeptical, but you go do you. Give it a try, see how you go. What I really have an issue with is people calling it superior, and by calling polyamory superior as if it's the right thing to do, they're shaming monogamous people. That's really the problem, because monogamy has got a long history in human beings. It's been the source of a lot of morality and stability, and it's really good for children to have a husband and a wife who are dedicated to each other and are not looking for other relationships and, spreading their energies too thin. Monogamy has done a lot of good things. That is a really big discussion. I'll try and keep the discussion of monogamy to a minimum and try and just talk about polyamory. And one thing I want to talk about in polyamory that every man needs to become aware of before he's potentially talked into this. So listen closely. If you're in a relationship where your partner starts to talk about polyamory, please know as a fact that if you do it, you're going to be experiencing a massive lack of equity in your polyamorous arrangements. And it's not necessarily unique to polyamory, but you will find it most strongly in polyamorous relationships because the dating market in the West is heavily lopsided towards women. If we want to talk about privilege and the ways that men are privileged, and there probably are some, but if we want to talk about real privilege, I don't think you'll see it anywhere stronger than the female privilege of being a woman in the dating market. When it comes to dating and sex, women have it so good, so easy. Particularly young women. I'm not saying all women, but in the time when people are usually dating before they've settled down, 18 to 35, women have it so much easier than men. I'll just throw out some arbitrary statistics. I'm not sure if this is actually true, but I think that this captures what I'm talking about quite well when I say that the top 5% of men can have casual sex as easily as the bottom 80% of women, if you understand me. Like, it is so easy for women to enter into short-term relationships with men that you would need to be in the top 5%, the cream of the crop, the absolute best of the man, in order to experience that kind of abundance that women have as a baseline, even low-quality, unattractive women. It's just the way the genders are set up, and we have a society that enables this and, dare I say, even encourages this at some point out of this misguided belief that women have had it so rough that they need to be propped up in some way. So if you are interested in being polyamorous as a man and you want some success with that, you think that it's going to bring you happiness, I sincerely doubt it. You would need to be in that top 5% of men in order to make a success of it. Otherwise, you're going to be experiencing what this poor bloke's experiencing. The wife has got no problem, no difficulties whatsoever attracting a huge number of partners, but he's left there, holding his privates going, what about me? Why aren't I having any success? And on top of that, let's just assume that you're in that top 5% of men. Like this guy's discovered, high-quality women aren't necessarily going to want to sleep with you. Why would they be interested in a married man? If you say, hey, I've already got a partner, I'm just polyamorous, will you please enter into a short-term relationship with me or have sex with me? Well, if they're a high-quality woman, why would they? They don't need to settle for being the side piece of action for somebody else. If they're a high-quality woman, like the kind of women you should be attracted to, they can have the whole package. They can find a guy who's single and ready to commit to them. They don't need to be the other woman. It's why you get this massive inequity between the sexes, because high-quality women won't enter into casual sex. They just won't. Like, I see lots of people, across the internet sending out examples of women acting really slutty and sleeping around, and as if this is indicative of female behavior. It's not. It's indicative of female behavior when those women are, low-quality women. They don't have good morals, they don't have good ethics, they don't have good character, good personality. They can't expect to achieve the highest quality results in the dating market. But if a woman is high quality enough, she absolutely can. Now, this is a huge difference for a man, because while a high quality woman isn't going to need to engage in casual sex, a high quality man will, because it goes in line with his evolutionary mating strategy. He's got that biological drive to just spread his seed as far and wide as possible. So that's what he's going to do. Like, a man will enter into a casual sex relationship. Even a high value guy will do that because there's really no loss for him. For women, it's a completely different, kettle of fish. Kettle of fish. What a bizarre idiom. I should look that up. All right, let's not get distracted with idioms. All right. So yeah, that's basically it. If you're polyamorous as a man, you're basically going to be stuck in a situation where you can't get laid, or if you can, it's only going to be with low quality women, the kind of women you're not really attracted to. So yeah, if you want to do poly as a man, you've basically got to become that top 5% of guys, which is extremely difficult. It's not impossible. Well, maybe it is impossible if you don't have particularly good genes, like you're not tall, good looking. It is basically impossible, and it's not really worth trying. Or you could just lower your standards and just date low quality women, but I don't know why you get any enjoyment out of that. Maybe you could just keep your polyamorous arrangement purely sexual and just have sex with prostitutes. But then, you might not be the kind of person who enjoys sleeping with prostitutes. Not all men do. And I can completely understand that as well. So I don't really see any redeeming qualities for a man in engaging with polyamory. You'd have to be so top tier in order to make it worth it for yourself. Your partner's just gonna, she's just gonna run away with all kinds of opportunities, and you're gonna be stuck, with a really, really raw deal. The one instance where it can balance itself out is if you really are high value enough as a man and you have a polyamorous relationship, you may find that even though her opportunities are larger than yours, your partner might just not want to engage in those opportunities, to take advantage of them. Because if you're a high value guy, you've basically satisfied her hypergamy. She's not looking for other opportunities. So for her, even though she has the freedom to explore polyamorous partnerships, she might just not want to because she's happy enough with you. But you as a man who are attracted to novelty and variety and have a different sexual mating strategy, you can potentially explore. And there you might find a little bit of balance. But it's a very rare situation. Basically, I would say because of the massive imbalance of the dating market and the way that this is exaggerated in polyamory, just don't do it. Not worth it. Not worth your time. You'll end up angry, bitter, jealous rages like this guy, and you should. That is a normal response. And if you ever feel like you're in a situation where you're pressured into an open relationship like this guy was, my advice would be to run. Get away from her. This is not the kind of woman you want to be with. I think you need to have a very, very intense conversation with her to find out whether or not this marriage actually has any legs, or whether or not it's best just to leave it. All right, so at the end of a story, I like to go through some of the comments from Reddit to see what other people thought about this situation. So let's go ahead and do that. You opened your relationship for the wrong reasons. Opening up a relationship is supposed to happen from a mutually trusting, mutually secure starting point, not as a solution to enable continued infidelity. That is really, really well put. To enable continued infidelity. That's exactly what he's done. He has agreed to this, and it's not good for him, and it's really not good for her. It's like how you shouldn't be codependent with a drug addict or an alcoholic. You don't want to engage in kind of behavior that's going to allow them to continue their terrible, addiction. In this way, unless you call her on her bullshit and really demand change, or leave her, unless you provide some kind of consequences, you are enabling her in terrible behavior, and that's not good for her either. She just continues to go down a dark path. So yeah, really good comment. I like that one. Next comment. If she isn't willing to modify what she's doing for a while to help you stabilize in this new situation, then the signs aren't great. Yes, absolutely. This goes back to what I said earlier, that you should only move as fast in an open relationship as the slowest person is comfortable with. And, if you're not having any success dating other people and you're still jealous and you've got rages and you're insecure, if she isn't willing to actually take that into account, like where you're at and how successful you're being, and modifying her behavior in light of that, then she doesn't respect you. She doesn't, then that is a strong red flag, and it's a sign that the relationship isn't good. Yep, I agree with that comment. Next one. If you're not comfortable with the open relationship, don't participate or go on a swinger forum. Ask if she wants to go to swinger parties. Try and find something like that if it's what you truly want. Yeah. That actually makes a little bit of sense. I mean, I think swinging is weird personally, but I don't want to, project my values onto everybody. But in a sense, that does actually remove some of the inequity, because if you're just acting solo, the woman can just go off and get hit on by 100 men so easily, in one night, whereas you might go 12 months before a woman is interested in being with you because you're a married man. But if you go to a swingers party, or if you become involved in the swinging community, which isn't something I know a huge amount about, you'll always be swinging with other couples, so nobody will have an experience that the other person doesn't also have. So, I mean, I don't think that swinging is, again, a good solution to this particular person's problem. But I guess for other couples, if you're really, really, really feeling like you need sexual variety with other people, and that's something you absolutely have to explore, and you are bothered by this inequity in the arrangement between the genders, then yeah, I guess swinging could be something you would you could try. Next comment. I personally wouldn't disclose that you're married. Why do they need to know? It's like looking for a friends with benefits. As long as they know that you're not exclusive and it's a no strings attached deal, so that nobody gets led on. This might surprise people, but I actually agree with this statement. I think that we need to examine this belief, this sort of unchallenged belief we have in our society, that you owe people knowledge about yourself, that they are somehow entitled to that particular information. I don't think that people are. I think that you're entitled to keep things to yourself. I don't think you should ever lie about it. So if somebody says that, if you're pursuing somebody for a romantic relationship and they ask, what your marital status is, or whether or not you're seeing other people, I think that you can legitimately say, that's private, or I'd prefer not to divulge, or I want to keep this relationship separate from the rest of my life, if that's okay with you. Now, the other person is then within their rights to say, well, that's fine, but I won't date somebody unless they're completely open about what else they're going on with, in which case you need to tell them. But if they feel entitled to that information, I think that that's wrong. You're entitled to keep your kind of secrets. And as long as you don't lie and say, no, I'm completely exclusive with you, I'm not seeing anybody else, I think you're well within your rights to keep things vague and to say, no, I'm not comfortable sharing, or I'd need to know you better before I share that information. Particularly since, people are going to be, women, they've got so many options in the dating market. There's so many opportunities awaiting for them around every corner, that if you tell them that you're married to begin with, then they're like, right, well, there's 50 other guys who are interested in me who aren't married, so I'm not going to waste any time with you. So you're just shooting yourself in the foot, really. And they're not getting a clear picture of who you are or where you're coming from. I think that it's quite reasonable to save the exclusivity talk, for a couple of dates, maybe wait till the second, third, or fourth date, or if you've been dating for a month or something like that, before you actually sit down and go, okay, so what is this? Is it exclusive? Are you seeing other people? And you're well within your rights to say, like my personal life, that's something that is quite private for me. And I just think that we need to know each other more before I trust you, and we can open up about those kinds of things. So a lot of people hear what I've just said and say that you're being deceptive. Just hear me. I'm absolutely not saying that. It's not okay to lie. It's not okay to manipulate somebody. So if the person you're talking to and that you're pursuing says, well, I don't enter into a relationship with anybody unless they're, only seeing me, then that's the information you need to know, that even if you don't say that you're seeing other people. If you go ahead with that relationship, you are manipulating her because you know what her boundaries are and she deserves to know that particular information. But I would like to see some movement in this culture that gives a little bit more respect to people's privacy. I don't think that it's reasonable in the first meeting of somebody that you should get to know absolutely everything about that person. And we need to be more comfortable with saying to one another, like, oh, that's actually a pretty deep conversation. That's quite private. Maybe let's get to know each other a little bit more before we talk about that. All right, last comment for this story. I went through what you are going through now. She was caught cheating and didn't want to stop, so she suggested we open the marriage. I had the same lopsided experience as you at first, but eventually found greater success using OLD, I don't know what that is, using OLD looking for non-monogamy. Then the tables turned when she got tired of all the creeps that are cool with dating a woman in her situation, where I kept meeting women in similar situations to mine and having a good time. Her plan to have her cake and eat it too backfired along the way as I became more confident with myself and realized what a terrible partner she was. I love that story. I don't have much to add, but that's just a fantastic example of karma. Here you've got a guy who was forced into accepting an open marriage when he caught his wife cheating, and she thought that she had it great because now she could continue cheating, but she'd secured his permission. But turns out she got really bored of it. She didn't like all the guys she was meeting, and he was actually having a great time. And I've actually heard of situations like this before, where women force a relationship to become open, and they underestimated just how desirable their man was, and then the man starts having success, like it can happen, and she suddenly, even if she's having success, she doesn't think much of the quality of the guys that she's with, and now she's jealous, and now it's like, oh no, let's go back to monogamy. And the guy's like, nope, you opened this door. Now we're walking through. I think that's fantastic. So, yep, good for that guy. I'm glad he realized what a terrible partner she was. So that's the end of the first story. Now, before we get to the second one, I just want to talk briefly about the sponsor of this podcast, which is Man-Made Media. So if you follow my work, you know I talk a lot about evolutionary psychology, which is quite a new science. It's kind of had its roots in a few older ones from the beginning of last century, but really evolutionary psychology as we know it now is only a couple of decades old, 20 to 30 years. And so there's not a lot of good information out there. There's lots of journal articles and academic studies, but what hasn't happened is it hasn't really been popularized. Even the term evolutionary psychology isn't particularly well known amongst people yet. So this podcast and my YouTube channel, these are my small attempts to try and make this information more accessible, to popularize it a little bit. And I hope that I'm doing a good job with that. But it does beg the question that if I'm one of the filters where this information is coming through to the public in a way they can understand, well, where do I have to go for this information? And the truth is, in order to find good information, I have to read books, I have to read journal articles, I have to read academic studies. And that's all right for me because I'm really interested in this stuff, but it's just not for regular people. You know, people don't want to read a bunch of graphs and go through academic studies. That's not, they want to read a summary of it, an article. And that sucks because this information is absolutely important. And this is where Man-Made Media comes from, because what we do at Man-Made Media is we take these studies and then we turn them into videos done with very simple animations that explain the results of these studies. So you can get completely informed about the latest research of evolutionary psychology in a way that's easy to understand and totally accessible. So we've got a new video out. It's called The Ovulation of Strippers. Fascinating study. What they did is they tracked a stripper's earnings over her ovulation cycle to see if it had any effect on her tips. And I can't give away the results, but you will want to see this video. The results are absolutely astounding, and they're revelatory because they will change the way you think about sexual attraction. Essential that people know this. So check it out. There's a link in the description box on YouTube. If you're just listening on audio, go onto Google, type in man-made-media.myshopify.com, and there you can see the new video, the ovulation of strippers, and of course the previous video, the science of booty calls. Also a fantastic video. So check them out. All right, let's go on to story number 2, which title is I, a 22-year-old female, lost all confidence when my boyfriend, 22-year-old male, told me he was bored to death. I've been with my boyfriend for almost 6 months, and I thought things were going great. To give a bit of background, I've always been very self-conscious about my body and sexual performance with my former partners, mainly because vaginal penetration is impossible because it causes me terrible pain. I'm currently trying to solve the issue with medical help, but with no results so far. It never prevented me from being sexually active though, but it had a very negative impact on my confidence and ability to believe that I could ever be an ideal partner. When we got together, my boyfriend told me he didn't care, and we tried a bunch of other cool stuff, like sub-dom, spanking, new sex toys, and more. I felt good and sexy, and he told me about kinks he had never dared talk about with anyone before. I was willing to try, and we had a lot of fun. He always told me he was happy to be able to be himself with me, and I felt the same. Lately, we slowed things a little, and I was happy to focus on other aspects of my life, even though the sex was still good. Also, I guess I was a little tired to constantly keep trying new stuff. But a few days ago, we had a heated discussion, and he told me all of a sudden that he was very frustrated with me, that I wouldn't try anal, in brackets, we do it regularly on him, but I don't like the idea of me eating ass or having anything near my anus, that he couldn't even penetrate me, and other bunches of stuffs. Some of the grammar's bad, sorry. He was very angry and said that he'd never been so bored in bed. I felt really bad, but I asked him if we could talk calmly about it, which we did. We came to some solutions, and I think we're both satisfied with them. Since then, though, I feel really bad. I feel like I'm just very boring in bed and that I'll never be able to fully satisfy my boyfriend. It's like I spent years building confidence and everything was ruined in seconds. I don't really know what to do at this point. Any help would be appreciated. That is a sad situation. Alright, let's go into it. Let's start with the vaginal pain that she's experiencing if they try penetration. I don't know what would cause that. I've not really heard of that. She could just have a very small vagina, or potentially he's got a really big cock. But it's a mystery because she says that she's not having any results with the medical help. And if the doctors and people doing the medical intervention aren't able to help her, I wonder what it was that's causing this pain. She doesn't actually mention specifically what it is, which leads me to believe that potentially it's psychological in origin. It's a bit of a speculation, but it is possible, Imagine if she was somebody who encountered some sexual abuse, like as a child, obviously before her vagina has fully formed. If that was subject to penetration, it would have a lot of pain. And psychologically, I think it is possible that the pain could carry over, into adulthood. But that is just speculation. That's hard to say. Regardless of what's causing it, it's obviously having a big issue on her psychology. Like, she's got this lack of body confidence, she's got low self-esteem, and that's a real shame. Like, that's bad news, unfortunately, because for men, confidence is sexy. I think that a lot of men would be willing to overlook a woman's, less than optimal looks, even if she had specific sexual limitations, like she couldn't have, penis and vagina penetration. I think men would be willing to overlook those things if the woman was just confident enough. Confidence is really, really attractive. And the reason for that has to do with the amount of shame that a lot of men have about their sexual needs. So let me talk just briefly about the shame, because we live in a society that does not encourage male sexuality, We don't talk about an empowered masculine sexuality in our culture. Not at all. You don't have people saying to young boys, go masturbate, that's great, do that, that's awesome. Or, you sexually desire lots of women? You want to have sex with all the women you come across? That's awesome. Go for you. That is not the society we live in. We live in basically the opposite, which is very unfortunate because men have this strong need inside themselves, this strong sexual desires, and we don't have any reinforcement about it. A man is growing up, and as he's going through his teenage years, he wants to have sex with all of the women that he's coming across, all the other teenage girls, but that's not what his reality is reflecting to him. So there's a huge disconnect between his desires and reality. When he sees that despite how badly he wants it, there are no women lining up to have sex with him, a lot of men or young boys, they just sort of take it on subconsciously. Oh, there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my sexuality. And inbuilt comes this deep shame about their sexual desires. And my point about talking about that is that when a confident woman comes along into their bedroom, and this woman is got this perspective, sex is natural, I love sex, and I love that you love sex, and I love that you want to have sex with me, if the woman's giving off that kind of vibe, there is a huge release of shame for the man. Like, oh, I've always felt so bad about my sexuality because I just wasn't getting any reinforcement or any evidence that it was welcome in society. But here's this beautiful woman. She's confident. She wants to have sex with me. Oh, that's fantastic. And as I've talked about many times before, sexual pleasure and the release of shame is intimately linked. You know, by releasing shame, that's how you reach the highest heights of sexual pleasure. So with this particular story, let's just assume that her boyfriend is a nice guy, and he's tried to be understanding in this situation. You know, he understands that what she's going through with this pain in her vagina is her issue. It's not his, and he's trying to do everything right. He's trying to be a good guy, a good boyfriend. Despite his best efforts, I can understand that if there's no change, like it never shifts, she's never able to have sex in her vagina, that his shame is going to build up because he has this very natural desire to put his penis in her vagina. That's what he wants to do. I mean, it's weird to say that, but that's what he wants to do. He really, really wants to put his penis in her vagina. And because of our society with our hang-ups about sex and male sexuality in particular, he feels ashamed of that, and he desperately wants to release that shame. He doesn't want to feel that anymore. So the way to release that shame is to engage in penis and vagina sex and have her enjoy it. That would release his shame and make him feel so good. But unfortunately, her inability to engage in that act, no matter what the reason is, just her inability, that's going to make him feel bad. You know, that's going to keep the shame alive. And it's going to result in, unfortunately, what has happened in this situation, which is as understandable as it is regrettable. Ultimately, he needed to be more honest with her sooner. And I'm not saying that's a reasonable expectation, because everyone's doing the best they can. And, you know, that is a tough thing to navigate, especially if you're trying to be understanding, because a lot of people don't have a really good understanding or self-awareness about their own shame and how much that is impacting on their internal processing mechanisms. But in a perfect world, he was able to bring this up a lot sooner, you know, to be honest with her about what he was going through, because it's not really fair to hold on to this resentment, to let it build up, and then to just dump it all on her out in an argument, you know, to get angry. But this is what humans do. I'd really love to see some change in this, but it's very common, is we hold on to our resentments and our bitterness, and we keep holding on until it just sort of explodes out of us. You know, we've got to stop that, though. And the way to do that is to change the way that you think about your most unpleasant thoughts about your partner. So you've got to start to use the good times to talk about it. So when things are going well between you and your partner, and this isn't just exclusive to romantic relationships, this goes for friendships, families, whatever. Use the good times when you're getting along well to talk about the difficult subjects. That's how you can come at it from, hey, we're on the same team, we both want a resolution here. You know, and that's the discussion will stay practical and calm and productive, and hopefully you can reach a solution. When you do it the opposite way, you know, you just wait until you get angry, and that's terrible, because anger it's such a divisive emotion. You know, it doesn't lead to anything good. I mean, it's understandable because he doesn't want to feel vulnerable. Like this sexual desire that he has, that makes him feel intensely vulnerable because he's got such a strong desire and it's not getting met. And there just might be too much shame for him. And so the only way he can really even talk about it is to become angry, you know? But if he's able to be honest, that's what he should do. And what would that look like? He would probably just start to cry and say, look, I feel so bad when you don't want to do this because I feel rejected. You know, I feel vulnerable. I just feel really needy, and I just feel like I'm ugly and you don't want me. And I know this is ridiculous because it's your issue, not mine, but this is just my experience, you know? And God, as long as you're in a relationship with a good person, if you're able to really be vulnerable with somebody and not accusatory, gosh, it'd be amazing how much movement can be had. You know, a situation that was potentially horrible can become a situation for healing where you come closer. You know, it's a really missed opportunity. But, you know, guys don't like being that vulnerable. Sorry, I shouldn't even say guys. People don't like being that vulnerable. People don't want to express their emotions. They want to put up boundaries, and and kind of deflect that attention away from that vulnerability. And of course, the easiest way to do that is to make the situation about her, to put the blame on her, like, you're not doing this. And there's such a difference between you're not doing this and I feel so vulnerable. They're expressing the same thing, but in two completely different ways. That one is a kind of twisted, dark version of what was actually the pure original feeling. But we do this, we get angry because it helps you feel in control over a situation. That's what anger is an assertion of control. And potentially he's feeling particularly vulnerable because I would imagine, given all of the kinks that he's into, he likes toys, spanking, sub-dom stuff. I think she said he likes getting pegged. So, I mean, these are some pretty intense kinks. And I think that with that comes more shame. I don't know if that's necessarily scientific. I can't prove that, but that's just my intuitive feeling of it, that the more kinks a person has, the more shame they probably got around their sexuality. That's kind of what drives kinks to become kinks. And that's not a problem with that. Like, if you do have a lot of shame, exploring it in sex is actually quite a healthy way of doing it. So I'm not shaming you for your shame. I'm just explaining why this particular guy might be especially sensitive about this issue. It's just tragic though, because it was a dumb move. Very impractical to let this all come out in an argument, because, I mean, what's his end game here? What's his strategy? He was, in coming out in a sort of accusatory way, he was trying to make her feel insecure and kind of guilty. Trying to make her be more sexually open out of guilt by, saying, well, I'm bored in this situation. He's got to know that was going to hurt, and that's going to actually put back his progress. I think his initial strategy was a lot better, when he was just going slowly, being understanding, being the good boyfriend, because it was slowly building up her confidence. I think she was saying she's feeling more body confidence and more sexually confident. Like, it was working, and they were trying a whole bunch of new things. And now potentially all of the good work that he did beforehand in building up her confidence and moving her towards the kind of sexual confidence that he would enjoy, he may have just blown it all, which is really, really sad. But it does sound like they talked about it afterwards. I mean, hopefully with enough honest conversations, there's been no permanent damage, but for this girl, she seems particularly sensitive, so he may have actually said the exact wrong thing. Hard to say how much of a problem this will be in the future of their relationship. It does make you wonder, actually, why did they slow down? I mean, they were trying lots of new sexual things, but then she said that it slows down. What did she say? She said she was tired. Interesting. Well, that can happen because, it's actually quite an interesting phenomenon. It's one that doesn't paint romance in a particularly idealistic light. So we're going to talk some real authentic honesty here, but I think that women can actually get comfortable inside relationships, and when they feel comfortable, like there's no chance of the man leaving, that's when the sex can dry up. Oh, this is not at all PC to say this, but I'm sure that as I explain myself, you're going to understand exactly what I'm saying. But women can use sex as a way of securing a man into a relationship. And potentially that was the purpose of what she was doing. She was willing to experiment with all this new sex stuff, all this BDSM play, because there was a new relationship and she wanted to get him into a commitment. Now, she's achieved her purpose. They're 6 months into the relationship. She's got what she wants. They're in a relationship. That was the purpose of the sex. That's why she did it. Of course it ends. Of course the sex isn't going to maintain itself. That's her perspective. But that's not necessarily his perspective. All right, ladies, like, men don't think that same way. They're more along the lines of, well, the sex was like this to begin with. Now that it's stopped or it's dropping off, I actually feel cheated, like manipulated, like, what the hell? I wanted the sex to continue or for us to even go even further. We started with some surface level kinks. I want to get really freaky. So he's thinking that the sex is going to be continuous, and it's not. And so he's annoyed. And I mean, I've heard women say this to me explicitly, that they will try more sexual stuff if they're worried that their boyfriend's going to leave them, or if they're interested in getting a guy into a relationship. So I'm not being some sexist dude here. I'm just repeating what women have told me. It's even in some of my YouTube videos. Go and check a video I did called Sex Life Consistency. It was probably like the 5th or 6th video I ever released on my channel. But there you'll see women explicitly saying, like, yeah, I would do more sex stuff if I wanted to attract somebody into a relationship or if I wanted to keep a relationship. They weren't necessarily proud of this behavior, but it was absolutely a reality. And if you break down the kind of dating market into pure economic terms, this is what's occurring, is women are trading sex for intimacy. I know it's very complex, and I know it's very nuanced, but at a basic level, women want intimacy, and they know that men want sex, so they're trading the sex for the intimacy. And it's not like men are, not manipulative in a sense as well, because men are trading intimacy for sex. And you don't even need to phrase this in terms of a manipulative. I mean, it doesn't sound good, but it's just a transaction, really. There's no reason why it can't be completely clean, why both parties can't get exactly what they want. Man says, I want sex, but I also don't mind a bit of intimacy. And the woman says, I want intimacy, but I also don't mind a little bit of sex. They're not really using each other. They're complementing each other. That's the basic economics of the dating market. So what happened in this argument is he's basically expressing that he thinks he's getting a bad trade. Like, you've got my commitment, but this sex has dropped off, and I'm not happy about it. You want my continued intimacy? You want to be in a relationship with me? Well, I need more sex then, or I need a bigger variety of sex. And ultimately, if he thinks that he can get a better deal, he will move on. He'll take his business elsewhere. And I would say that as understanding as he's able to be in the first 6 months, I doubt that he's going to be okay with settling for a lifetime of never having sex in the ordinary way of putting his penis in a vagina. I think that it's potentially too fundamental a part of the human experience for a guy to say, yep, I'm comfortable never ever doing this. You could try all the other crazy kinks that you like. You could have nothing but blowjobs and whatever. I doubt that he's able to move on from that particular one. So that's sad. Because I don't know to what degree this is a genuine medical issue and whether or not she can get it sort of sorted. I am suspicious as to how medical it actually is, especially given that she's got this insecurity and low self-esteem, and the doctors haven't been able to help her as of yet. So I would recommend therapy. I know I recommend therapy a lot, but in this situation, I really do think that she needs to talk to an actual professional, potentially even a sexologist, about what she's going through. Because if she doesn't make any movement in this situation, I think she will lose this guy. And I don't think her options are going to necessarily improve. I mean, she might be confident. She might think, you know what, I can take my business elsewhere. I can get commitment from a guy who's not going to expect this from me. I just don't think that that's accurate. I don't think there are going to be many men who are willing to be in a relationship if there's basically no sex. And I don't think she's going to take that route, because I don't know what you guys felt from the comments, from the original story, but I don't get the sense that she really enjoys sex. It does seem like a little bit of a chore, or a bit of a compromise for her. And think of it this way, if she wants to be in a relationship, I don't think she's going to trade in for a new fellow, because that means going through the whole, first couple of months of sex again. It means, trying all the things that she's not really interested in, putting up with that, doing the compromise just to reach the 6-month level of commitment again. That's a lot more work to do all over again. She's invested in this guy. I think she very much wants to make this relationship work. And I think that she's going to be upset that it's basically going to mean that she has to continue to work at it. She's got to go deeper into her sexual issues. Now, that has been made harder for her because of the unfortunate way that this issue has come about with this big argument, but that is basically the only way forward. All right, let's look at the comments, see what other people thought about this one. I don't think your boyfriend is bringing this up now because he wants to spite you. I think he didn't bring it up earlier because he knew it would be hard and painful for you to hear and wanted to protect you from that pain by not bringing it up. But in the end, if two people really want to come together for each other, the facade has to come off. Yeah, absolutely. This guy isn't out to hurt you. I think that he was a bit foolish or just unfortunate with a bit of bad luck with how it all came out. But often you don't bring things up out of a misguided attempt to protect somebody's feelings. And if he knows that she's insecure about this, he would have, if he's a nice guy, tried to reassure her, no, I'm fine with this, I'm doing well. And it is a misguided way of attempting to be a nice person, to sort of lie to protect somebody's feelings. but it gives a little bit of short-term relief at the expense of a lot of long-term pain, because ultimately you have to be honest with your partner about what you're going through. And if you're kind of pissed off about the lack of sex, yeah, even if you know the other person has had trauma in their past or a medical issue, you've got to be honest about it. Like this commenter said, the facade has to come off. Next comment. He should be very grateful and appreciative that you give him sex in the first place. I know I would. What? That's ridiculous. No, I don't agree with that at all. Let me say that again in case you didn't catch that. He should be very grateful and appreciative that you give him sex in the first place. I know I would. This, you see this a little bit, and it's part of this kind of, let's all be empowered and it's all about you and girl power or whatever. Like, this idea that if you're in a relationship with somebody, that doesn't mean that you owe him sex. Like, he's not entitled to sex with you just because you're in a relationship. I mean, obviously I'm not endorsing rape, but it is a very normal and reasonable expectation that if you're in a relationship with somebody, that you would be having sex with that person. That is a normal thing to expect, and they have a right to be a little bit annoyed if there's some drop-off in the sex. It's certainly warranting a conversation. So, yeah, I don't agree with the sentiment of that comment at all. If you're in a relationship with somebody, there's a pretty normal expectation that it's going to be a sexual relationship, and if it's not, that is something worth discussing. All right, next comment. I think a big milestone for you will be overcoming your apprehension towards anal sex. I 100% understand that it probably feels like defeat, like giving in, like quitting on yourself, and admitting to a weakness and a vulnerability that you've always been struggling with. Right, she did mention in the story that she didn't like eating ass or getting anal sex. Eating ass is such an awkward word. I think the technical word is analingus, but I mean, that is a really uncomfortable word to say. Analingus. But what is this comment saying? They're basically saying maybe that you should try the anal sex if there's too much pain in your vagina. Right. I mean, that could be a compromise, but she doesn't seem to like that either. But, beggars can't be choosers. I suppose if you're basically, pushing your boyfriend away from ever having vaginal sex, you can't be hugely picky about the other stuff that you're willing to try. But I mean, anal sex isn't for everybody. I guess my question would be, have you tried it? How difficult it was. I do think that you probably owe it to your partner and to yourself, if you want a fulfilling sex life ultimately, to give these things a try. So even if it makes you uncomfortable, I think it's worth exploring that discomfort in conversation and then ultimately in the bedroom with a practical experience. All right, final comment for this story. He just has to accept you full. I'm sorry that you had this problem, and I'm kind of in the same boat. Mainly due to my wife, a female of 24, having our son, who is now 9 months, and our sex life has dropped, and I hate it. Last time we had sex was over a month ago, and that's how it is. And the longest we didn't have sex was a full year. But here's the thing, I may hate it, and it makes me very frustrated, because to us men, sex is life, and we need it. But I love her so much, I know it's not the end of the world, and I love her still. So this guy, he's coping with the fact that his sex life has dried to nothing by just saying, well, I love my wife, so I'll put up with it. I don't really agree with that. I think it is normal to experience a drop-off in your sex life after birth, not least because the vagina has just been through something incredibly intense. But I don't think it's normal or appropriate to expect a man to not have sex for a full year. What kind of a relationship is that? Even if the woman has had a lot of pain in her vagina and is, not sleeping much because of the new baby, I just think that to kind of keep a man in a relationship for a full year and have no sex with him, it's kind of mean. He has a need. Potentially women don't understand how important sex is to men, and that's a shame, because they potentially project their own importance onto men and assume it's the same, but it's not. Each gender is different. Men need sex, like this guy says it. And even if you're going through intense things with your vagina because of the birth, I don't see why you can't give him a blowjob, once a week, or even just a hand job, some kind of sexual relief to on the one hand, just give him that sexual, physical pleasure and relief. On the other hand, just to have some closeness, some intimacy. I know a lot of post-baby couples, they're like, oh, can't deal with sex, it's way too much effort, I'm far too tired. But then when they actually get down to it, they really enjoy it and they're glad that they did it. So there's a little bit of inertia preventing you from starting in the first place, but just push through it. I feel sorry for this guy, not only that he's getting no sex, but that he's also rationalized it so that the woman's not doing anything wrong. I don't think that you're in a good situation, brother. I think you need to speak to her and basically say, I need to have more sex, and I think that's a normal thing to ask. But that is the end of our story. So we'll move on to our third one. Just quickly before we do that, I'm going to plug my Patreon. I know that we're used to getting things for free on the internet. I know I am, but understand, like, a lot of work goes into this podcast and into my YouTube channel as well. So if you've ever gotten value out of the work that I do, it would mean a lot to me if you made a small pledge on Patreon. You know, just a small amount of money every month. It makes a big difference and helps me create new content. The Patreon doesn't just sit there. We have an active community. I post there every single day. And it's a great way to contact me. So if you ever have a story that you want me to cover that you find on Reddit, or just something from your personal life that you'd like me to talk about on the podcast, hop onto Patreon, find my personal email, and contact me, which is exactly what this next person, the next story, has done. This is from one of my Patreon supporters. So this story is not from Reddit. And I'm going to go ahead and read it. It doesn't have a title. Lately, I've been feeling quite insecure about some things. At the moment, I'm working 2 jobs. A debt collection job and a software engineering internship, which is my field. I'm trying to get a career sorted and be the best version of myself possible. At the end of this week, one of my colleagues will have drinks and a lot of folks will be there. I've been conflicted about going there. This is the debt collection job. Part of me wants to go, but the other part of me is like, do you really want to be around those people? To give you some context, most of these kids are in their early 20s, either uni students or just people who don't have much ambition. Mostly they do drugs, etc. They're party people. I'm trying to get my career sorted and improve as a person, and I'm probably not going to go. It's good times for sure, but there are more important things I just need to focus on, like studying for an English exam I have, working towards my PR, etc. But through this internal conflict, I've also realized that there is a deeper issue. I've grown quite bitter, and I mean really, really bitter about life. Could be a part of the family trauma combined with red pill ideology, and you have a guy in his 20s like me who's lost hope in women, and I mean in a dark way. I've noticed that lately I only see the bad in people. I am angry more often than not. Sometimes I'm just sad. There is a girl that I work with that I have a massive crush on. I also think that she fancies me a lot, but the problem is that we're both a bit of introverts. I'm less introverted, but I'm definitely among the quieter people in the office. I've had so many chances of asking her out or acting on it, and I mean a lot. But I didn't, and now I'm bitter about this too. I just don't want to have so much bitterness about life, though, because it's not good. I'm bitter because I'm scared of not doing it. I'm bitter because I was scared of doing anything. I'm bitter because she probably has a lot of guy attention anyway, so why bother? I'm bitter because I feel pathetic, while I just want to have a girlfriend. But then I think about it, and I'm like, oh, I need to be the best version of myself before that, and blah, blah, blah. Bitter because this become the best version of yourself seems to be in vain when you can't even ask a girl out properly or get laid properly. Or maybe my expectations are just skewed. I have insecurities about my race as well in my mind. I'm like, some girls won't like me because I'm brown. They don't like brown men. At least not the ones that I'm into. I've had plenty of chances of sleeping with women that I didn't find attractive enough to my standards, some blatantly hitting on me, etc., but I refuse to do so. I feel a bit overwhelmed figuring out how to navigate this and come out of it with a healthy mindset. In closing, I think a lot of this comes from YouTube. Yes, fucking YouTube. Its machine learning algorithm is designed to make you watch more and more, and the way it achieves that perfectly is using rage bait, clickbait, etc. I don't know if there is a cause or correlation, but I think it could be a bit of both when it comes to my situation. My landing page is filled with women hitting the wall rages, SJW owned type videos. I'm seriously considering to go and see a therapist, as I literally have no one whom I'd be able to have a conversation about this except online or whatever. But even a therapist may not be aware enough of these sorts of things or topics to be able to help me. My friends are either into different things, drugs, or busy with their lives. I'm sitting here losing my shit, although part of it is my responsibility, as I have heaps of things to take care of in my life. Let me know your thoughts. If you wish to make a video with this covering my situation and whatnot, maybe we could all gain from this. Just keep my name anonymous. I appreciate that you took the time to read this. Kind regards. Oh, there is so much in this that I want to unpack. Just going to take a quick drink of water. Alright. Let's get into it. First of all, my sympathies. For real, you're going for a rough patch, and so you have my empathy and my compassion. This is not easy. It's absolutely not easy what you're going through. There's a lot to talk about. So let's talk about the bitterness that you're experiencing first. You mentioned that part of that might be family trauma. That is actually quite common. I would say that this is something affecting most adults today because a lot of us went through a lot of difficult stuff in childhood. Trauma is actually very, very common. Stephen Molyneux says that most people have undiagnosed PTSD, and I can believe it. But the thing is that as children, you don't often realize how bad you have it. And that's actually a psychological protection mechanism because as a child, when you're vulnerable and completely dependent upon your parents, if your parents are in any way kind of sadistic or negligent in some way, to become fully aware of that is terrifying, because you're dependent upon them. If they're not people you can actually trust, you don't want to know that because you'll just panic. And so you block that information. And so in a certain sense, it's a sign of strength that in adulthood, you're able to recognize and actually feel your bitterness because it signifies that you're now in a much safer place. You're taking care of your own needs, you're providing for yourself, and you're an adult, a fully fledged adult who's able to feel their authentic feelings. A lot of people, they never reach that stage, at least not emotionally. They might be adults in the physical sense, but emotionally they're still children. And they'll never criticize their parents or really look honestly about the trauma they experienced as children. It's just too frightening. And so I know that it sucks that you're going through some bitterness right now, but from one perspective, take it as a sign of your own strength that you're actually able to get in touch with these feelings. So the other thing that you mentioned is that you might be bitter about the red pill stuff. So for people who aren't aware, red pill is kind of an aspect of the manosphere that really talks about female nature in a very non-PC way, kind of like the raw truth about women and dating and all that kind of stuff. Now, it is very common for people when they come to terms with this information to go through an anger phase. The red pill rage, the anger phase, is absolutely real, and it is justified because you have been actively lied to as you were growing up. Because men don't have it easy, but that's not what we're told. We're told that men do have it easy, that we are the privileged gender, that we live in the patriarchy and that men have it so good, and that females are the disadvantaged one. Those are the gentler sex. And it is bullshit. That is a lie that you've been fed. And the reasons why you've been told that lie are too big to go into, but it is a pervasive lie across the Western world. Lots of self-hating men because they bought into what the culture has told them about how privileged they are, and they don't realize that reality does not reflect that. Now, there may be some situations, there are definitely situations where men are privileged, but I'm talking right now specifically about dating. The early stages of relationship and access to sex. Men are hugely disadvantaged. This is not a small 60-40 kind of thing. I'm talking a massive handicap as a man. And one of the reasons why it's so difficult to break people out of this is because women don't concede this point. It's quite extraordinary. You speak to women and you point out the very obvious reasons why they've got it so easy in the dating market, but they're so reluctant to give any ground on that. And I think part of that is because they don't want to give up their position of privilege by admitting that they have it. And the other part is that they're genuinely unaware of it. The negative interpretation is they're hugely solipsistic. The more generous interpretation is that it's just outside of their understanding and no one's ever spoken to them about it before. But women on the whole seem blissfully unaware of how easy dating is for them, especially the initial stages of dating. Of course, as the relationship goes longer, the balance of power actually shifts and men have it a little bit better and women get to a more vulnerable and position and they get more dependent on the man. Though even that's changing, with the divorce laws and all that stuff, that's lessening that power imbalance so women stay in control even into the longer parts of a relationship. But I digress. What I'm trying to say is that in the dating phase, men are massively disadvantaged. So in case any part of you has been logging onto YouTube or whatever, looking for some kind of validation of the kind of victimhood that you feel, allow me right now in this podcast to give you that validation as clear as I possibly can. As a man in the dating market in the West, you have been victimized. You have been lied to. You've been told that you have a privileged position and it's not true. You are hugely handicapped because you're a man, and it's not fair. So if you feel angry about that and you feel victimized, good. That means you're recognizing reality. Now let's talk about your anger. You said that you feel mostly angry, but sometimes sad. That is I took a lot from that particular sentence because I'm particularly intrigued by the sadness. Now, when you're in a lot of pain, like I imagine you are with all of this bitterness, possibly the only emotion that you really can feel is anger, because other emotions are just too vulnerable. They just hurt too much. Whereas anger at least comes with a sense of righteousness and control and you're taking action and I'm angry. And so I can understand feeling that anger is actually good because at least it's kind of getting to the pain. But I would be very cautious about feeding it. As much as possible, acknowledge the anger that's there, but don't build upon it. Don't feed the anger. What you really, really want to do, if you want to move past this, is try and get to the source of the hurt. Try and get in touch with that sadness that you spoke about, because that is the most direct path to the vulnerability that's actually at the source of all of those emotions. And there, what you're going to transfer from is the anger phase that you were in to now the grieving phase. And the grieving phase is hugely healing. It's going to look different for every guy. I'd imagine there'll be some crying, some, finding some abandoned forest and screaming, smashing your fists, complaining to people. I don't know what source your grieving is going to happen, but it will be a painful process and you'll feel very vulnerable and very frightened. And that's just your clue that you're doing it correctly. And you need to go through this because what you're doing is you're kind of rebirthing your experience of reality. The reason that it hurts so much is you're emotionally adjusting to reality. And the disconnect between your expectations, that things should be easy or at least fair, with the reality that they are absolutely not easy or fair, that pain is the disconnect between those two things. And so the more you're able to experience that pain and process it and move through it, then your expectations are going to finally sync up with reality. And that's when it ends. And it does end. There is an end to the grieving process. You won't stay in mourning for the rest of your life. But the way to do it is to move through the sadness, and once you've done that, you're going to create a new life and you're going to be stronger because of it. But it's a very dangerous thing to do because so many people get stuck in the anger and there's no growth in anger, not in perpetual anger. If you just stay on YouTube, and YouTube is terrible for that, there's lots of people who just stay continuously feeding their anger and there's no self-growth whatsoever. And you're absolutely right to blame a lot of it on YouTube because YouTube's top interest is not your well-being. It's not your emotional well-adjustment. YouTube wants you to stay on YouTube so it can sell you more ads, and everything that it does is geared towards that. It's just a corporation out to make more money. It doesn't care whether or not you're angry or sad so long as you're watching. And so they have an algorithm that absolutely reinforces rage culture. And you particularly find this amongst the manosphere. There's lots of rage culture. I have a friend who talked about grief entertainment, he calls it, which is also an interesting phraseology, because grief shouldn't be entertaining. It should be painful. Now, I'd like to think that my channel is an exception. I don't want to reinforce rage culture. If you ever catch any content from me that does seem to be taking an easy answer and promoting that, please let me know. I want that feedback because as much as possible, I want to move people out of that phase. And I think that it's a difficult line to walk sometimes because I want to validate the victimhood that a lot of people are experiencing, because I think that we've lived in a culture where they've gotten no validation, and that's extremely harmful because people are walking around thinking, I'm crazy, no one seems to see this the way that I see it. My life has been hard, yet everyone keeps telling me because I'm a man that it's easy. So I want to validate people, but I really, really don't want them to get stuck there, because the way out of that is not blaming other people. It's by looking within. It's not easy and it's not fair, but life isn't fair and your expectations have to sync up with that. So I'd like to think my channel is an exception, and there are a couple of other channels that I like, but I understand that YouTube on the whole is not geared towards nuanced conversation. That MGTOW creator I was talking about before, he's a former MGTOW creator. I talk with him over email and over Skype occasionally. He was a guy who really explained to me how this all works, because his channel became big by buying into this rage culture by just, pandering to his audience. And he was really successful. He told me that he made $45,000 US a year just from like donations from people who were really digging this kind of highly emotionally charged content. So he saw that every time he blamed women or got really, really bitter about it, that those videos got more views and he got more donations. He saw what was successful. And so he kind of created a character, a sort of caricature, like acting. And the more angry he got, the more money he got. He told me that he is aware that one of the biggest creators, one of these MGTOW, I hate women kind of creators. I don't want to mention names in particular here because it's not about the names. I'm just talking about the trends. But he told me that this person makes over $150,000 per year, US dollars. So it's like 200,000 Australian dollars, which is an extraordinary amount. And I'm aware of that person's channel. And you know what? Their views aren't that big. Like they're not that much larger than mine. Well, they are a little bit, but my channel's been through ups and downs, and at its peak, they would have been similar, and that is so much more money than I would ever make. Not even close. And I think that the reason why he's getting so much in donations is because he's blatantly pandering to the audience. The content is toxic, and for a certain group of people, that's the content that they want, and they're willing to really pay for it. And it's a really it's a dark place to end up in, because if you're making $150,000 a year by spreading hate and blame, it's going to be very difficult to give up that position. It's one of the things I really admire about my friend I was talking about earlier is he did give up his position. He deleted his channel and he's no longer pushing this kind of stuff because he had an ethical responsibility. He understood to say, no, this is not right. I can't keep doing this. I can't, I felt like a drug dealer, just pushing something that was unhealthy on people. And, the drug in this instance is that lack of responsibility, that message that says, hey, men, no need to improve, no need to do any kind of introspection. We can just blame women, and that's dark. That psychology is dark. So I really admire my friend. He took an ethical stance and he got off that train, and he paid hard for it, He lost all of the money, it's a huge financial adjustment for him. But I think that ultimately he'll be better off for it because he's going to create a new life on a more solid foundation of inner peace. I think he still feels a little bit guilty about all of the grief entertainment that he that he was responsible for spreading. But, this is what an emotionally mature person does. They come to terms with their past and they choose to do the right thing in the future. And he has my full support. Oh, that did seem like a bit of a tangent. But what are we talking about? We're talking about how YouTube, it absolutely feeds this outrage culture. I experienced it inside myself. You said your landing page is filled with SJWs getting owned, that kind of stuff. That content is toxic. Absolutely. I stopped watching that a long time ago. It was interesting when I first came across it because I was like, what is this, And it had a certain appeal, but highly emotional, highly divisive. I'd say 2 months ago, I went through my homepage specifically and I turned off all of the political content because it just so happens that you watch one or two political videos or like a debate and then suddenly it's just, people interviewing protesters and making fun of them, and it just really dark kind of content. And there was no helping me. Like, I already know what my political views are. Finding people arguing about it and people getting owned, that wasn't helping. That's not healthy. It just plays into more of this outrage culture that we've got. And so what YouTube does give you is the option of manually adjusting your homepage. So when a video comes up that is not going to be good for you to watch, and you're annoyed that it's suggesting, there's 3 little dots and you click on those and you can say, stop suggesting these videos. And it'll ask you, can you tell us why? And you can say, I'm not interested in this type of content. And do what I did. Go through your channel and unsubscribe to all of the channels that you're not interested in seeing their content anymore. All of the negative emotional content. Or you could just hop off YouTube altogether. That's another solution. Except you do need to log on to watch my channel, of course. But no, I wouldn't get off YouTube altogether because it's how you use it, right? Like it's been helpful to me in lots of ways because after I removed all that political content, I started watching a lot more uplifting videos, just for laughs, good-natured pranks. I love watching travel vlogs, people just traveling around the world, having a good time, great relationships, great fun, beautiful editing, lots of nature. Also love watching videos on history and infographic, things on science. And this kind of, I watch a video like that and it makes me feel more positive about human nature. It's uplifting. So rather than just hopping off YouTube altogether, just do some tweaking and try and find some content that is going to make you feel more positively about people. Because we are highly susceptible to influence from our environment. We absorb what's going on in our environment. It's like you said, you don't want to go out with these people who you work with, these debt collectors, because they're just party people. They're into drugs. They don't have any ambition. And I applaud that decision. I think, it would be fun to go out and have a party, but the hangover's often not worth it. I think it's a really good idea to avoid these people. And really what you're doing by changing what comes up for you on YouTube is you're avoiding those kind of people and that kind of content in your on life too, on your online life as well, which I think is really important. And I really think that the people who push this kind of emotional crap, all this divisive stuff, they really have a lot to answer for. I think it's unethical what they're doing. There's one creator, again, I'm not going to name names because it's not about personalities, but I logged onto their Twitter feed once, and this guy every single day was posting, 5 to 10 stories that he's cherry-picked from across the internet of women doing terrible stuff. And I just think, well, what's the point, Well, I know what the point is. He's got 200,000 subscribers on YouTube, and he charges $500 for 1 hour of talking with him. So he's obviously very, very successful. But if that's the price of success, just pushing more anger and hatred, no thanks. I think that it's exploitative and it's extremely unethical. So let's come back to the bitterness. You said that you're bitter about not approaching the girl, and I actually think that's one of the instances where the bitterness is appropriate. You don't want to go too far with it, but if you're upset with yourself and you've got regrets, then that can be used as a good motivation to take charge of your life and to make a change. Next time when presented with the opportunity, hopefully you'll act quickly, and you'll go and ask her out. So if you're feeling bitter, make some changes and do them fast, because you don't want to get stuck in the bitterness. But the bitterness is good. It shows that you're aware of you were in a situation where you could have acted, but you didn't. And so bitterness is an appropriate response there. But what you don't want to get stuck. And the way to do that is to make sure you're really kind to yourself for the small successes. If you're taking steps to put your life together, then take a little bit of pride in that, And you're obviously, you're trying to get better. You're reaching out to me, you're working 2 jobs, you're trying to get your life together, you're studying, you had that English exam. So there's lots that you're going into that's trying to move yourself in the right direction. I hope that you're giving yourself enough credit for that and not just beating yourself up for the opportunities that you didn't take. Take some time to feel good about the opportunities that you are taking. But of course, there's always room for improvement, and being upset with yourself can be the sign that says that you should be doing that. You say that you're interested in potentially speaking to a therapist. I think that's a great idea. As you know, I'm a big proponent of therapy, and I think that it's absolutely essential for people to sort themselves out, particularly if you've got family stuff, family trauma that you need to resolve. I basically think everybody should go to therapy. I mean, the number of people who don't need therapy has got to be the smallest percentage of a small percentage. The tiniest fraction of the human population is actually well adjusted enough that they could get nothing out of therapy. I think it's the best, as long as you have some disposable income, it's the best use of your money that you can possibly have. And if you don't have a lot of money, go use that online app, BetterHelp, and that way you can write to your therapist every single day, and that's a lot cheaper, but speak to somebody, and you will find that it's going to have a very positive effect on your dating life, because a man who's well adjusted and who has sorted out their emotions and has keen self-awareness, they're genuinely confident in themselves, a confidence that's not based on their ego, it's actually based on genuine competence, that's going to be really attractive to high-quality women. So absolutely do that. Go see a therapist. It's the best use of money that you can possibly have. Outside, of course, from pledging my Patreon. No, jokes aside, of course my content I think is useful. So keep listening, but it's not going to have the kind of impact that actually seeing a personal therapist is. That's somebody dedicated to you. They're listening straight to you, and it's going to be individual to your circumstances. There's no comparison. No amount of internet content can possibly compare to a genuine therapeutic experience. There's no comparison. So do that. I would personally recommend seeing a male therapist. Don't see a female. And it's not that a woman wouldn't necessarily have genuine compassion for you and want to help you, but I do think that what you're describing with all of this dating and bitterness is you're actually having an experience that's unique to men. And I do think that women will have difficulty understanding a uniquely male issue. But if you can find an older man who you respect and who's able to understand what you're going through and validate your feelings around all this bitterness and this anger, then you're going to feel safe with that person. Like, oh yes, this is somebody who gets me. He knows where I'm coming from. And once you've been validated by your therapist, then the real work can begin. Then they can begin to help you, navigate through all these issues. Let's talk about what you mentioned with the dating market. Gosh, there was so much to unpack with this particular one. But I wanted to applaud you for saying that you're not going to go with low-quality women. You've had many options and opportunities to sleep with low-quality women, but you didn't take them. That's really good. A lot of people make this mistake. They just go, oh, well, I want to feel good about myself, so I'll just lower my standards and sleep with this low-quality woman. Don't do that. You'll feel good in the moment and feel way worse about yourself afterwards. Maintaining standards in the people you choose to interact with is really, really important. And when you turn down an opportunity for sex because you know the woman isn't up to your standard, that's really good for your self-esteem, In the back of your mind, you go, wow, good for you. That means that you're worth more. Because really, I mean, it's like a business transaction. You don't want to sell yourself for less than you're worth. And so if you know that the woman that is offering you sex is not on the same level that you are, that you've put, years into your self-work and becoming an awesome person, she's doing nothing other than, binge watching Netflix and opening her legs for you, then she hasn't earned the right to be your sexual partner. And so if you sell yourself for less than you're worth, you'll feel bad about yourself. Honestly, in that situation, it's better to be celibate, and just wait until you've gotten to the point where you're having that success. But then that's a difficult one because you don't want to get trapped in this I need to be the best version of myself before I can take action. That's absolutely not true. You don't want to keep putting it off. You've got to change your mindset where you recognize that you're not at your end goal, that you are a work in progress, but that there's nothing wrong with where you are. And I know that sounds a little bit contradictory to say you're still a work in progress and you want to be better, but you're also okay with where you are. And it's slightly paradoxical, but once you start to feel it, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So if you're always improving and you're happy at the pace that you're improving and you're happy you're moving in the right direction, it doesn't matter that you haven't reached your final goal. You might never reach your final goal. You might always be making progress, but you will be confident in the pace that you're setting. And that's enough. That's enough to basically say, because I'm moving in the right direction, I'm good. Women were going to want to be with me. I am feeling confident enough to move out into the dating world and to try and have some success. Although you mentioned, and this is a good point, there's so much good stuff to talk about in this, but you mentioned that what's the point of improving my life if I'm too nervous to speak to girls? Yes, exactly right, because it's not just about having a good life. If you don't have any social skills whatsoever, what's the point, You need to know the basics of pickup and of attraction and of speaking to women and convincing them to go on dates with you. You need to at least know the basics, and potentially you don't need to know anything other than the basics, but that at a bare minimum is what you need to know. So if you're not yet comfortable walking up to women you're interested in and starting a conversation, that's what you need to work on. That's really, really important. Now, I myself, I know all the basics of pickup and attraction. I've done it in the past. I don't talk about it a huge amount because, to be honest, I don't find it particularly interesting. I find those people who spend hours and hours dissecting, a couple of seconds of interaction on who had more power and frame in this situation and what he could have said, I find those people weird. It's just not that interesting. Really, if you're doing pickup right, you shouldn't have to do it much because you should just be picking up the high-quality woman you're interested in spending your life with, and then you never have to do it again. But of course, in order to get her, you need to develop your skills somewhat. I think that those people who get stuck in the pickup artist lifestyle, who are just really addicted to having short-term success picking up women, I think that's a little bit strange. And I don't mean to shame you if that's where you're at. You're on your own journey and there may be things that I haven't considered, but I think ultimately I haven't seen people who have done the hardcore pickup artist lifestyle who actually seem happy or have any part of their lives that seems enviable to me. I think that the more interesting thing to do is to analyze what I analyze, which is relationship skills. an attraction that goes over many years, that deeper part. That's more my level or my area of expertise. But that's not to say that pickup isn't absolutely essential, because ultimately a product, and you're the product in the dating market, but your product is only as good as its advertising, So you've got to learn the basics and become more confident with women. You because you're bitter, you've got to improve your mindset about women and about your prospects. And the way to do this is to reach out and try and become friends with some high quality women. Don't even make it sexual to begin with, but just have more real in-life experiences with women that make you feel positively predisposed to them. Because women are pretty sensitive to social cues and body language and things like that. They can pick up on a lot of that. So if you're bitter and you're trying to pick up women and talk to them, they'll probably sense that. But if you've just come back from, an awesome night out with a bunch of high quality women and you're just like, oh, women are great, this is nice, then if you go to approach somebody on that evening, you'll be coming at them with a much more positive mindset, and you're going to have a whole lot more success. You're really going to increase your chances of actually, getting that girl's phone number and hopefully getting into a relationship and having the girlfriend like you say that you want. The other option is just, it doesn't lead anywhere good, because if you're trying to pick up girls with resentment, you're not likely to have success. Then your lack of success is going to create more resentment, and then it just goes round and round in an endless cycle. So, no good at all. So if you recognize that inside yourself, take the action necessary. Make friends with women that you respect, and then try and meet other women through them. Really high quality women are friends with other high quality women, and they do exist. I'm not saying they're common. I'm not saying they're easy to find, but they do exist. And knowing that there are high quality women out there, the question you've got to ask yourself is, why would I spend time with low quality women? And why aren't I taking actions in my life right now to get me to be friends and to bring these people into my community so that I can date one of these high quality women? Oh, that was a marathon. It was very enjoyable, though. I really appreciate the email. I wish you the best of luck. I hope that you're able to put some of these things into practice. Find some high quality women to be friends with. Adjust your YouTube, get some therapy. You've already started on the right direction. You just need to keep going. There's no reason why in 12 months' time your life couldn't be completely different based on the action you started taking today. I really believe in your ability to improve yourself. Oh, wow. These podcasts, by the end, I'm just spent. I hope you guys are appreciating this. No, I joke. They're really fun. It's highly enjoyable, but also quite exhausting. Luckily, because that was an email, there are no comments for that one, so I don't know what other people will think about it. So if you're listening on YouTube, make sure you can leave a comment below. But that is the end. Thank you to Man-Made Media for sponsoring this podcast. Be sure to check out their 2 new videos. That's the science of booty calls and the ovulation of strippers. Learn the science, easy to understand. They're only $5. Doesn't cost much. Great way of supporting me, supporting the podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. I will catch you again next time.